WCNC TV Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Good Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. Joining me today is Charlotte City Councilman Tarek Bakari and Larkin Eccleston, frequent guests of the program. Also, the creators of R&D and the QC. But you guys have not been around. You guys have not been around on your podcast the last few weeks, have you? Or
we have.
1 week.
We've got a big episode in the works, though.
Big episode in the works. Could have Dan McCready, maybe even Dan Bishop on it.
Both Dans. And you can decide which Dan is the right Dan.
Wow. All right. So check out their podcast. That's coming their way pretty soon, I guess. Seriously, that'll be good, guys.
Yeah.
Seriously. We want to begin with something that's pretty unsettling here in Charlotte. It's the homicide rate. As of this taping, and this may change, but as of this taping, 2 more people have been shot and killed here in Charlotte this week. That makes 57 homicides this year already. On Wednesday night, a 22-year-old man was shot at a neighborhood pool on Clifton Meadow Drive. He was driven to the hospital in Matthews, where he later died. And then back on Monday afternoon, a 17-year-old girl was shot and killed in the middle of the day. 3 other teens charged with her murder. Now, another staggering number. How many teens are being charged with murder? In both 2016 and 2017, there were 4 charged with murder for the whole year. Last year, there were 13 juvenile murder suspects, and so far this year, there are 6 teenagers charged with murder up until this point. As leaders of this community and as Charlotte City Councilman, I realize there's only so much you guys can do, but what can be done? What will be done?
Well, I think one thing that's important to note is the statistics around what the murder rate is. Oftentimes, it's hard to pinpoint what the cause of these type of spikes is. But we do know that the warmer months, the summer months, tend to be the time where we see the most of that. So unfortunately, it's unlikely that this is going to end, particularly until we get into fall or winter. I think we're trying to do more around upward mobility. We're trying to do more around affordable housing. If people don't see a way forward for themselves to be successful, to improve their situation in life, they're likely to turn to crime. They're likely to feel like they have nothing to lose. And I think with many of the young people that are partaking in some of these criminal activities, that might be the way that they feel. So we've got to continue to try to fight to give people opportunities and a way to be more optimistic about their future.
And I think when you look at the comparison of where we are this year compared to all of last year was a lower, a good anomaly. The year before is kind of more we were tracking, and we were talking about this a lot more then. I know a lot of us are very concerned about this, and the 2 things I'm really pushing for: 1, we've got to do more with conflict resolution, particularly with these young folks. I mean, it's just, we have to be out in the community. We have to figure out ways that this resonates with them. And then the other thing is, we've got this great resources in our community, the Data Science Initiative of UNC Charlotte, many other things like that. We need to take all of this data and really try to figure out how can we almost have, that pre-crime type unit approach where we figure out where to bring this conflict resolution to.
And there's a group that's being convened right now to do exactly what Tarek just mentioned. And so hopefully it'll point in the direction of how can we anticipate who is most at risk, what areas are most at risk, and how can we provide services and kind of wrap around those people in those communities, try to help head some of that off before it happens.
Both things you guys have talked about are sort of long term as far as, affordable housing and things like that, which by all means, by all accounts, I think it plays a big role in situations like this and opportunities people have. But the short term, with it spiking, it seems to be so high. Is there anything the city can do, police can do to put a curb to it? You point out that it's a stat in most cities, in the summer crime goes up, but what can be done in the short term then?
Well, the data-based approach is absolutely the best. I mean, right now, we have technology where you can be thinking about something and then all of a sudden it's going to pop up on your phone. I mean, we have big data capabilities and the expertise in town to be able to it's really about conflict resolution is the #1 theme or trend that's in all this data. And if we figure out exactly where and how to go deploy it most effectively, I mean, that's going to make near-term impacts on this.
And Tarek mentioned conflict resolution. I think that's another thing that can be both short and long-term. Things that maybe used to be resolved in a fist fight are now being resolved in a gunfight. And I don't think that a lot of the teenagers, the young people in our community realize the long-term consequences of taking an action like that. And so we've got to make sure they realize, look, don't let what should be a fist fight turn into a gunfight. It will forever change the course of your life, and it's something you can't come back from.
That's right.
Because the chief will tell you in the press conferences he holds, every now and then about this, is that a lot of these instances are domestic related. That they're people who know each other. This past week, the incident involving the young woman was not. But in a lot of these, there are people who know each other who are doing things to each other, and fights that escalate.
That's right.
Is what they are. All right, let's switch gears to something else that was on your all's plate last week, and that was Charlotte City Council approved a $2.6 billion budget. One of the big takeaways: the tax rate was lowered to set at revenue neutral. That basically just lets the city bring in the same amount of revenue as the years before due to the higher property values after revaluation. It also means, though, that some folks are going to be seeing higher bills because of that, even though the tax rate is lower. Here are some other components of the city's budget. The budget raises minimum pay for city employees to $16 an hour by the end of the fiscal year 2020. More than $55 million also created towards and preserving, creating affordable housing, which we just talked about a second ago. $2 million for officer training for CMPD. This is the first time I'm having you guys on since that budget was passed. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that we're doubling down on the efforts on affordable housing. I think the revenue neutral tax rate was important because if you looked at a heat map of where those revaluations really spiked percentage-wise the value of homes in our community, a lot of it was in the north end that I represent and that Dr. Harlow represents. And many of those are the neighborhoods where not everyone who maybe has been a homeowner for decades, they really haven't seen that spike in value until recently. Now they're seeing 100, 200% increases in value. Those are the people that would really be the most harmed by us trying to go above revenue neutral with this tax rate. And I think we were mindful of not putting a burden on the people who in many cases are the ones that can least afford it.
That's exactly right. The revenue neutral piece of this is, I think, the thing that we should all take a second and be grateful, especially with those impacts to affordable housing that we were able to accomplish. But even with that, we really were able to accomplish a lot in this budget. My favorite couple things are, one, we finished a 2-year journey we've been on with CMPD officer pay. This time we took care of sergeants, step 13, the highest level officers that we didn't take care of the last year. So that's amazing. Things like, after learning about the Cross Charlotte Trail debacle and our use of capital, now we have this capital pre-planning fund that really is going to be the process-based approach to make sure that we know what things cost before kind of going out to the public and saying, here you go. So there's a lot to be proud of in this budget, and I was glad to be able to vote for this one as I wasn't last year because of the tax increase.
Yeah, it was unanimous this year, which is a good feeling.
Yeah. Where do we stand when it comes to affordable housing? What kind of progress do you feel like we're making as a city?
I think we've made a great deal. That doesn't mean we don't still have a long ways to go, but we have said now we will be putting a $50 million affordable housing bond on the 2020 ballot as we did in 2018. The private sector has really stepped up to the plate to get involved in this, bringing in an organization like LISC that can bring more dollars to the table and some of the wraparound services that people need to be successful once they've got that safe, affordable roof over their head. It's a multi-pronged approach to a multi-pronged problem. I think that we have made more progress in the last 18 months than had been made maybe in the previous decade, and I think we've got to keep the pedal to the floor.
Yeah, I think the key here is we need to continue to be acting in a sense of urgency. I mean, it's what we've done is historical in town. It's big, but to me, it's just we've placed puzzle pieces on the table. Like there is still a lot of work to be done. We have to understand how our relationship with LISC is really going to work. We have to really, commit to some numbers in some areas and put a more detailed, quantifiable plan in place of where we're going to go. Otherwise, even 50 million, 75 million from the private sector is just going to be throwing a couple pebbles in an ocean of a problem here.
All right, more Flashpoint after this.